There was a time when the Indian immigrant in the United States represented something rare, highly skilled, technically competent, quietly ambitious. They arrived with degrees that held weight, filled gaps in critical industries, and integrated into American society with little friction. In hospitals, universities, and research labs, they became indispensable, not by numbers, but by merit. For decades, that reputation held. But as their numbers grew dramatically over the last 3 decades, something began to change. The Indian origin population in the United States grew from under 1 million in 1990 to well over 5 million by 2023, an increase of nearly 500%. Alongside this, hundreds of thousands of undocumented Indian migrants are now part of the same system. In several states and suburbs, the shift is visible. Walk into a Costco in some areas, and you wouldn't be wrong to feel like you're in India. On its own, that isn't a problem. But as opportunities began to tighten, many American workers started asking a harder question: were they truly being outcompeted on merit? Or was something else driving the system? And that question led them to look more closely at how the immigration system actually works.
I was given the news that in 90 days, my job was over, and I had to train my replacement. It was the most humiliating and demoralizing thing I've ever gone through in my life.
What they found was not a system purely selecting for excellence. It was a system being exploited at an industrial scale. And at the center of it lies the H-1B visa program. The H-1B program was designed as a temporary solution, a way for American companies to bring in specialized talent when no qualified local worker could fill the role. A tightly controlled pipeline with limited numbers, strict criteria, and visas granted for up to 3 years, extendable to a maximum of 6, not intended as a permanent pathway. But over time, that pipeline did not just expand, it was dominated by one country. In 2024, Indian nationals received over 70% of all H-1B visas issued in the U.S. A disproportionate share of H-1B visas flows through a handful of Indian IT outsourcing giants: Tata Consultancy Services, Infosys, HCL Tech, Wipro, Cognizant, and Tech Mahindra. These are massive corporations with global reach. What stands out, however, is the ethnic composition of their workforce, often far removed from the equal opportunity ethos the American system is built upon. At Cognizant, for example, roughly 70% of professional and managerial staff at its Texas headquarters identified as Asian in 2023, compared to a nationwide average of around 18%. Such outcomes rarely occur by accident. Behind them operates a coordinated system, a revolving network of recruiters, hiring managers, and immigration consultants working in sync. Roles are informally aligned, job postings are placed where they are unlikely to be seen, requirements are tailored, and opportunities circulate within closed loops, often with outcomes that appear predetermined. In 2022 to 2023, a former employee, Sean Katz, sued Tata Consultancy Services in a New Jersey court, alleging systematic bias in hiring, assignments, and promotions against non-South Asian workers. As of 2025, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has also been investigating multiple complaints, including claims that older non-South Asian employees were targeted for layoffs while visa holders were retained. But this extends far beyond a single company. Former employees have alleged that some managers prioritize hiring H-1B workers to exploit visa dependents, with reports of kickbacks through under-the-table payments or salary sharing. In one federal case, Karan Gupta, a former senior director of data analytics at Optum Inc., a subsidiary of United Health Group, was convicted in February 2026 for orchestrating a ghost employee fraud scheme worth over $1.2 million. According to court findings, the scheme ran from 2015 to 2019, during which Gupta hired a close friend into a high-paying technical role using fake credentials. The individual, based in New Jersey, far from the assigned role, performed no meaningful work for nearly 4 years, rarely logging into his computer, meeting no colleagues, and contributing nothing, while continuing to receive a salary exceeding $100,000, along with raises and bonuses. A substantial portion of that salary was funneled back to Gupta as kickbacks. At a broader level, this same abuse takes more structured forms, one of them being benching, where employees are kept without active projects and later pushed out, only to be replaced by prearranged candidates from abroad. In a 2024 verdict, a federal jury in California found that Cognizant had engaged in a pattern of intentional discrimination against non-Indian and non-South Asian employees. Plaintiffs described being benched for extended periods before termination, only to be replaced by visa-ready workers.
Fake degrees, real jobs.
A steady pipeline of candidates is sourced from India, many legitimate, but others with inflated or fabricated credentials, often linked to diploma mills. In one widely reported case, Manav Bharti University, a private university in northern India, was found to have issued over 36,000 fake degrees over an 11-year period since 2009, highlighting how easily fraudulent credentials can enter the system and how it can be exploited at scale. That exploitation doesn't stop at credentials. It extends into how candidates are selected, and it becomes most visible in the H-1B lottery.
Rigging the H-1B lottery.
On paper, the selection process is straightforward. Applications are capped, demand exceeds supply, and a random lottery determines who gets in. But randomness only works if everyone plays fair. Instead, multiple applications are filed for the same candidate, often through affiliated or shell companies, dramatically increasing their chances of selection.
The body shop machine.
At the center of this are so-called body shops, small consulting firms that exist primarily to sponsor visas rather than deliver actual projects. These firms often file large volumes of applications, sometimes for roles that are not tied to immediate work, creating a pipeline of candidates ready to be placed once visas are secured. One candidate, 10 applications, sometimes dozens more.
The Telugu advantage.
A disproportionate share of this pipeline traces back to 2 Telugu-speaking states in South India, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh, accounting for roughly 25 to 30% of Indian H-1B applicants. For context, Telugu speakers make up only about 6 to 7% of India's population. Yet in migration to the U.S., tightly connected networks, where information, referrals, and opportunities circulate within the same circles, give them a clear structural advantage. Candidates are funneled through structured pathways and placed into roles by intermediaries who know how to navigate and sometimes exploit the system. In 2019, federal indictments tied to firms such as Nanosemantics Inc. alleged fake job offers were used to secure visas and build a bench of workers without real jobs. That same year, Venkataramana Manam and Satish Vemuri were arrested in connection with firms including Procure Professionals and Crypto IT Solutions, accused of submitting fraudulent applications and maintaining pools of visa holders ready for deployment. More recent reporting, including investigations highlighted by commentator Sarah Gonzalez in Texas, has pointed to consulting firms operating out of residential addresses in cities like Irving and Frisco, filing large volumes of visa petitions tied to questionable or non-existent roles. In one instance, a listed office location reportedly led to a residential property with no visible business activity, raising questions about the scale of operations claimed on paper. Each year, an estimated 70,000 students, along with roughly 10,000 H-1B visa holders, arrive in the United States from Telugu-speaking regions alone, many entering on student visas, transitioning through OPT, and eventually moving into the H-1B system. In some cases, these pathways involve master's programs with questionable credentials, including allegations of proxy work, outsourced assignments, and minimal academic engagement, all while maintaining visa status. Over time, this has translated into rapid demographic growth. The Telugu-speaking population in the U.S. has expanded nearly fourfold within less than a decade, rising from around 320,000 in 2016 to over 1.2 million by 2024.
Who's paying the price?
As these numbers grew, the impact began to show in the American labor market. In a 2025 survey, 56% of U.S. citizens said they believe H-1B visa holders are taking their jobs, reflecting a growing sense of displacement.
So I've been actively looking for a job for about 2 months now. I've sent out 100 applications.
Job, but a lot of companies, including some very big ones like Amazon, Microsoft, LinkedIn, there's a few of them, they will run these ads for these positions. All the while, they already know that they're going to hire somebody through a third-party contracted service that sits offshore.
Well, in the very beginning, we did not know that we would be training our replacements. The CIO came down from Boston. She proceeded to tell us that we are going to outsource IT infrastructure and IT development, and we have chosen 2 companies, Infosys and Tata.
In 2022, some of the largest H-1B employers, many of them outsourcing firms, hired over 34,000 new visa holders while laying off at least 85,000 employees. Across industry forums and employee accounts, a consistent theme emerges: H-1B workers are often preferred for control. Because their legal status is tied to their employer, they are more likely to accept lower pay, work longer hours, and less likely to push back. And once inside the system, leaving it is rarely straightforward.
From temporary to permanent.
The temporary nature of these visas, in practice, does little to limit long-term stay. Consider a typical pathway. A worker arrives in the United States on a company transfer visa such as an L1, or directly on an H-1B. The visa is tied to employment, which means their legal status depends on keeping that job. If the job ends, a 60-day grace period begins. Within that window, the individual must secure new sponsorship, change status, or leave the country. In practice, many don't exit. They shift status, moving to a B1/B2 tourist visa to buy time. or enrolling in a university on an F1 student visa, using OPT as a bridge back into the job market. At the same time, existing consulting networks keep them within the system, moving workers from company to company through corporation to corporation arrangements. If a role disappears, another is found. If not, they are placed on bench, retained on paper, inactive in practice, but still within the system. If they regain sponsorship, they re-enter the H-1B cycle, and from there into the employment-based green card process, where employer sponsorship leads to permanent residency. With strict country caps and limited quotas, backlogs can stretch for years, often decades, effectively extending their stay in the United States. In some cases, applicants who entered the system in the early 2000s are still waiting in the queue today. And this doesn't account for the families that come with them. Spouses arrive on H-4 visas, many of whom are eligible for work authorization, while children born in the United States become citizens, further extending the system's footprint across generations. And if that wasn't enough, there is organized influence behind it. IT Serve Alliance, the largest association of small and mid-sized IT staffing firms, actively lobbies on H-1B policy and green card backlogs. Its leadership is overwhelmingly Indian origin, drawn from the same ecosystem. This was the reaction that followed a recent H-1B fee hike.
This could kick the butt of Donald Trump. Kick his ass, really. Let's face it, kick him twice.
The result is a system that turns temporary stays into something people rarely leave. This is how reputations collapse. What began as a story of merit is now, in many circles, seen as a story of manipulation. This is Whispering Peepal. If you value deep dives into the ideas shaping our world, subscribe and stay part of the conversation.